The moment I answered my phone and heard my brother's voice, I knew something was wrong. Not because of what he said, because of what he didn't say. He didn't ask how I was holding up. He didn't mention that it had only been 11 days since we buried our grandmother. He just said, smooth and rehearsed, "Hey, we need to get together soon. Talk about some things." And then he laughed. This short, easy laugh that had nothing behind it. The kind of laugh you use when you're buying time. I told him, sure, of course. Let me know when. And then I hung up and sat very still in my car in the hospital parking lot, still in my scrubs, and I thought about what my attorney had said to me 3 days earlier. Her name was Carol. She had handled my grandmother's estate for over a decade, and when she called me into her office the week after the funeral, she did not offer condolences or small talk. She set a folder on the desk between us, folded her hands on top of it, and looked at me the way people look at you when they're about to tell you something that will rearrange your life. "Your grandmother left everything to you," she said. "The house on Birchwood, the investment accounts, the life insurance policy, all of it. You're the sole beneficiary." I remember the silence in that office. The way the afternoon light came through the blinds in long flat lines across her desk. "All of it?" I asked. "Every cent, approximately $420,000 in liquid assets. The property on Birchwood appraised last year at $260,000. There's also a safety deposit box we haven't opened yet." I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. My grandmother and I had been close in a way that's hard to explain to people who have large, warm families. She was the only person in mine who had ever made me feel like I wasn't too much. Like I was exactly enough. Knowing she had chosen me, deliberately, in writing, with a lawyer present, felt like hearing her voice one more time. But Carol wasn't finished. She leaned forward slightly and said, "Before we file anything, I need you to do something that's going to feel counterintuitive. And I need you to trust me completely." I looked at her. "Okay. I need you to tell your family that the estate is tangled in probate, that your grandmother's accounts were flagged for a tax discrepancy, and that it could take 2 to 3 years to resolve. Tell them you're not getting anything, that there may not be anything left to get by the time it's settled." I stared at her. Why would I tell them that? She opened the folder and turned it toward me. Inside were documents I didn't fully understand. Account transfers. A letter on official letterhead. Dates highlighted in yellow. "Because," she said quietly, "someone has already been asking questions they have no business asking." She gave me 2 days to decide. I took one. I called my mother that evening and delivered the lie Carol had written out for me almost word for word. My voice was steady. I had been a nurse for 6 years. I had learned to speak calmly in situations where nothing was calm. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother said. The sympathy in her voice was so immediate, so polished, it felt like something she had already prepared. "That must be such a disappointment." "It is," I said. "But what can you do?" "Well, you can always come back home for a little while. Until things stabilize." I thanked her. I told her I was okay. I said I loved her, and I meant half of it. Then I texted my brother the same story and waited. He responded in 4 minutes. Not to express sympathy. He said, "Makes sense honestly. Grandma was never great with money anyway. Let me know if you need anything." I read that message 3 times. My grandmother had been a retired school principal who owned her home outright, had no debt, and had been quietly investing in index funds since 1987. She was, in fact, excellent with money. My brother knew this. He had borrowed from her twice. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and went to wash my face. The next few days were strange and slow. I went to work. I came home. I fed my cat. I waited for whatever Carol had set in motion to reveal itself. She had told me to observe without reacting, to answer calls but not ask questions, to notice who reached out and what they wanted. My mother called twice more. Both times she mentioned, gently, that it might be worth talking to an independent attorney, someone not connected to my grandmother's estate. She knew a good one, she said. A family friend. I wrote down the name she gave me and sent it to Carol. My brother came by my apartment on a Thursday. He brought coffee, which he had never done in the 5 years I had lived alone. He sat on my couch and talked about work for 20 minutes, circling, and then he said, almost casually, "Have you thought about what you're going to do about the Birchwood house?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, if the estate is in probate, the property taxes still have to be paid. The utilities. Someone has to maintain it or the value drops. It might make sense to put it on the market now, before any of that eats into whatever you might eventually see." I looked at my brother. He was 34. He had our father's eyes and our mother's talent for making every manipulation sound like advice. "I haven't thought about it," I said. "Just something to consider," he said and smiled and finished his coffee. After he left, I sat with my hands in my lap for a long time. Then I called Carol. She picked up on the second ring, which made me think she had been expecting this call. "He mentioned the house," I said. "I know," she said. "He called the county assessor's office yesterday, asking about the property tax status on Birchwood." The air went out of my lungs. "He what?" "He identified himself as a family member handling the estate." She paused. "He is not authorized in any capacity. I've already flagged it with the county. But I need you to hear me clearly right now. Do not sign anything. Do not respond to any emails or documents that come from anyone other than me. And if your mother's attorney friend contacts you, do not return the call." "Carol," I said, "what exactly is happening?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your brother and your mother have been communicating with someone who holds a small promissory note against a property your grandmother sold 15 years ago. It's essentially worthless. But they're trying to use it as leverage to establish a creditor claim against the estate." I pressed my fingers against my eyes. "Can they do that?" "Not successfully. But they can slow things down. Create enough procedural noise that you accept a settlement to make it go away. That's the play." She paused again. "I need another week. Then I need you to come in, and I need you to bring your phone with all the messages they've sent you." I saved every text, every voicemail, every email. The week crawled by. My mother invited me to dinner on Sunday. I went. My aunt was there, my mother's younger sister, the one who had always been quieter than the rest of them, who used to slip me $20 when I was a teenager and tell me to spend it on something that was just mine. She sat across from me at the table and didn't say much. But when we were alone in the kitchen for 3 minutes, she pressed her hand over mine and said, low and fast, "I want you to know I didn't know about any of this until last week. And I want you to know I'm sorry." I looked at her. "She loved you," my aunt said. "Your grandmother loved you more than anything in this family. She saw what they were, and she made sure." Her eyes went to the doorway. "Just make sure you have everything documented." Then my mother walked back in and my aunt stepped away and started washing a dish that was already clean. On Wednesday, I drove to Carol's office. I had my phone. I had the voicemails. I had written down everything I could remember from the conversation with my brother, with the exact dates. Carol was already waiting for me. There was another woman in the room, someone I hadn't met before, who was introduced to me as a forensic document specialist. I did not fully understand what that meant until Carol laid 3 papers on the desk in front of me. "These were submitted to the probate court yesterday," Carol said. "A petition to challenge the validity of your grandmother's will." I looked at the documents. My name was on them. Not as the challenger, as the co-signer. I felt the room tilt. "That's my signature," I said. Except it wasn't. It was close. Close enough to make my stomach roll, but the loop of the R was wrong, and the Y dropped differently than mine. "It is not your signature," the document specialist said. "I've already prepared an affidavit." Carol set her hands flat on the desk. "Your brother filed this with a forged signature. Your mother's attorney friend notarized it." She looked at me steadily. "This is no longer a civil matter." I sat in that chair and I breathed, and I thought about every Sunday dinner, every Christmas, every phone call where my mother had said she just wanted what was best for me. I thought about my brother's easy laugh. "What do I do?" I asked. "Now," Carol said. "You let me make a phone call." She picked up her office phone and dialed my mother's number and put it on speaker and told her that we needed everyone together. That there was a problem with the estate paperwork that required the family's presence to resolve. That it should happen at the house on Birchwood, today if possible, and that it was in everyone's best interest to come. My mother agreed without hesitation. She sounded almost pleased. I drove to Birchwood ahead of everyone else. The house smelled like my grandmother. Lavender and old wood, and something underneath both of those things that I couldn't name, but had known my entire life. I stood in the living room, and I pressed my hand flat against the wall, and I told her I was okay, that I was handling it. My mother arrived first. Then my brother, who startled visibly when he saw Carol's car in the driveway. Then the attorney my mother had recommended, a man named Gerald, who had the look of someone who had just realized the situation was different than he had been told. Carol was already at the dining room table with two other people. One was the forensic document specialist. The other was a man she introduced only by his title. He was from the county district attorney's office. The room changed when she said that. I watched my brother's face do something complicated, cycling through several expressions before settling on a careful blankness. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, my mother started. Carol set a folder on the table and opened it. These are the documents filed with the probate court yesterday bearing Rachel's forged signature. She set another sheet beside it. This is the affidavit from our document specialist confirming the forgery. Another sheet. This is the record of your son's call to the county assessor's office, where he identified himself as a representative of the estate. Another. This is the promissory note you attempted to use as a creditor claim, along with the documentation showing it was settled and released in 2014. She closed the folder. And these, she said, pulling out one final set of papers, are the original will and beneficiary designations, signed, witnessed, and notarized, naming Rachel as the sole heir to every asset in this estate. Gerald, the attorney, picked up his briefcase and stood up. I was not fully informed of the circumstances of this matter, he said carefully. He looked at my mother. I can't be here, and he walked out. My brother pushed back from the table. This is insane. We were trying to protect the estate. Grandma wasn't in her right mind at the end. Everyone knows that. You can't seriously. Your grandmother was evaluated by 2 independent physicians in the 6 months before her death, Carol said. Both assessments confirmed full cognitive capacity. I was present for both. She looked at him without warmth. Sit down. He sat down. My mother had gone very still. She had the look of someone rapidly recalculating. Alyssa, she started, and then she stopped. Because that wasn't my name, and for a moment the slip seemed to unsettle her more than anything else. Rachel. Honey. We're your family. We were worried about you. You don't have any experience managing this kind of money, and You forged my signature on a legal document, I said. I heard my own voice. It was quieter than I expected and steadier than I felt. You tried to file a fraudulent creditor claim against my grandmother's estate. You had a lawyer notarize a forged document. Rachel, I am not asking you to explain. I looked at her for a long moment. At the woman who had raised me. At the person who had sent me a card every birthday that always said she was proud of me, even when she wasn't, even when she didn't bother to show up. I'm just telling you what happened. My brother's voice had gone hard. You know what you're doing right now? You're destroying this family for money. I looked at him. I had heard this before. Not from him, but the shape of it was familiar, the way people who take something call you greedy for noticing. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm just not pretending it was never broken. Carol spoke quietly to the man from the district attorney's office. I watched my mother and brother realize at the same time that the conversation they had prepared for was not the conversation that was happening. My brother tried again. Look, if we all just take a step back. The question, Carol interrupted, is how we proceed from here. She folded her hands. The forgery is documented and will be referred regardless. What is in your control at this moment is whether this stays a civil matter or becomes a significantly more serious criminal one. That depends on what you sign before you leave this room. She slid 2 sets of documents across the table. One to my mother. One to my brother. They were identical. A formal withdrawal of the probate challenge. A release of any and all claims against the estate, and a statement acknowledging that the creditor claim had been filed in error. My brother read the first page and laughed. It didn't sound like his regular laugh. It sounded like something with the air taken out of it. And if we don't sign? The man from the DA's office spoke for the first time. He had a quiet, factual voice, the kind of voice that doesn't need to be loud to be understood. He explained what the signed forgery and the notarized document represented in terms of specific statutes. He used the word felony twice. He mentioned Gerald's name and said they would be in contact with him as well. My mother picked up the pen. My brother watched her do it. His jaw moved. Then he picked up his pen too. When it was done, Carol collected the documents and slid them into her briefcase with the same composure she had maintained through all of it. I thought about how many times she must have sat in rooms like this, how many families she had watched turn on each other over someone else's carefully built life. My mother stood up slowly. She looked at me across the table, and her face was doing something I had never seen it do before, something that might have been shame if she had more practice with it. "I hope someday you understand why we thought this was necessary," she said. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say to that. Some sentences are not answers, just more noise. And I had spent enough of my life trying to respond to noise. My brother left without looking at me. After they were gone, Carol touched my shoulder once, briefly, and said, "Give me a few minutes." She stepped into the hallway to speak with the man from the DA's office. I walked through my grandmother's house, the kitchen with the yellow curtains she had never changed because my grandfather had picked them out. The small bathroom, where she kept a spare toothbrush for me until I was 26 years old, because she said you never knew when I might need somewhere to land. The back bedroom where I had slept every summer until I was 14, where the ceiling still had the glow-in-the-dark stars she had helped me put up when I was 7, slightly crooked because I had been the one holding the stepstool. I stood in that room for a while. When I came back to the dining room, Carol was waiting alone. She had the briefcase in her hand and one more folder on the table. A thin one, ivory-colored, with my name written on the front in handwriting, I recognized instantly. "She gave me this," Carol said, "about 8 months ago. She told me to hold it until it was clear the estate was settled and you were safe." She set it down carefully. "I'll give you some privacy." She walked to the front porch and closed the door behind her. I sat down and opened the folder. Inside was a single handwritten letter and a smaller sealed envelope with the words "Open Second" written across the flap. My grandmother's handwriting was the same as it had been since I was a child. Neat and slightly slanted and very deliberate. She wrote, "Rachel, if you're reading this, it means Carol did her job and you did yours. I am so sorry you had to go through what I know you went through to get here. I knew what your mother was. I knew what your brother was becoming. I didn't always know how to protect you from them when you were small, and that is something I carried for a long time. The money and the house, those are mine to give, and I give them to you freely. But the envelope is the thing I want you to have most. It's not money, it's just the truth. And I think you've always deserved more of that than you got." My hands were shaking. I set the letter down for a moment and breathed. Then I opened the second envelope. Inside was a photograph and a smaller folded document. The photograph was of my grandmother and a woman I didn't recognize, both of them young, standing in front of a building with a sign I couldn't fully make out. They were laughing. My grandmother looked lighter than I had ever seen her in real life. The document was a deed, not to Birchwood, to a property in a town in Vermont I had never heard of. A small house on 3 acres. My grandmother's name on it. And below it, added in an amendment dated 4 years ago, my name. There was a post-it note in my grandmother's handwriting attached to the deed. I went there once, a long time ago, and I always meant to go back. I thought maybe you could go for both of us. I sat in her dining room with that post-it note in my hand, and I cried. Not the way you cry when you're sad, but the way you cry when something finally stops hurting. The specific release of a grief that has been waiting patiently for the right moment to leave your body. Carol came back inside after a while. She sat down across from me and waited. "There's another property," I said. She nodded. "I know." She told me. "It's been in your name for 4 years. Fully paid. The taxes are current." She paused. "No one else in your family knew it existed." I looked down at the post-it note, at my grandmother's handwriting, at a woman who had seen everything coming and had quietly, methodically, made sure I would be standing when the storm passed. "What happens next?" I asked. "The estate closes in about 6 weeks. The assets transfer to you. The Birchwood property is yours to keep or sell. The probate challenge has been withdrawn." She was quiet for a moment. The DA's office will determine whether to pursue charges independently. That's out of our hands. And my family? She looked at me carefully, the way she had looked at me in her office the first day when she told me to trust her. That's up to you. I folded my grandmother's letter and put it in my jacket pocket. I folded the deed and put it with the letter. I looked around the kitchen at the yellow curtains, and I thought about a house on 3 acres in a town in Vermont I had never visited, and about a woman who had loved me quietly and strategically, and with more foresight than I had ever given her credit for. I thought about my brother's easy laugh, my mother's rehearsed sympathy, the 4 minutes it took him to text me back, the coffee he had never brought before and never would again. I thought about my aunt's hand pressed over mine in the kitchen. She loved you more than anything in this family. She saw what they were, and she made sure. She had made sure. On my way out, I stopped at the front door and looked back at the living room one more time. At the chair where my grandmother used to sit on Sunday afternoons with her crossword puzzle and a cup of tea that had gone cold because she always forgot to drink it while it was hot. "I've got it from here," I said quietly. To her, to the room, to the version of myself who had spent so many years trying to earn something from people who had already decided I wasn't worth giving it to. Then I walked outside into the afternoon and got in my car and drove towards something that was entirely mine. My mother called that night. I let it go to voicemail. She called again the next morning. I let that go too. My brother sent a single text 3 days later. It said, "I hope you're happy." I read it once, and then I archived the thread and made myself a cup of coffee and stood at my kitchen window watching the light change on the buildings across the street. I was a 29-year-old nurse who had worked night shifts for 3 years and eaten a lot of cereal for dinner and had learned to be careful about who I trusted with the quieter parts of myself. I was also, now, the sole owner of a house on Birchwood Street and a property in Vermont and more financial security than I had ever thought to imagine for myself. But the thing I kept coming back to, the thing that sat with me in the nights that followed, was not the money and not the house. It was the Post-it note. The fact that my grandmother had bought that property in Vermont 4 years ago and added my name to the deed and told no one. The fact that she had gone to Carol's office and written a letter and sealed it in an envelope and said, "Give it to her when she's safe." The fact that she had watched everything, understood everything, and had simply made sure. There are people who love you loudly, who announce it and perform it and want credit for it. And there are people who love you like my grandmother did. Quietly, precisely. By making sure that when the moment came, you would have exactly what you needed to be okay. I booked a weekend in Vermont in November. Just me and my cat and a long drive through the kind of fall colors you only get that far north. I wasn't sure yet what I would do with the property. Maybe keep it. Maybe fix it up slowly over a few years. Maybe sit on the porch and drink tea and forget to finish it while it was still warm, just like she did. Whatever I decided, it was mine to decide. That was the whole point. That had always been the whole point. 6 weeks later, the estate closed. Carol called to confirm and asked if I had any questions. I said no. She said the process had gone as well as it could, all things considered. I thanked her for everything. She said she was glad she could help, and then she said, simply and without any extra weight on it, "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman." Yes, I said. She was. After I hung up, I sat for a moment, and then I opened my phone and went to my grandmother's contact. I had never been able to delete it. Her name was still there, Grandma, with a little star next to it that meant favorite. I didn't call it. I just looked at it. At her name on a screen. At the small ordinary marker of someone who had been in my life so long that her absence still felt like a room with the furniture rearranged. You know, where everything should be, and you keep reaching for something that isn't there anymore. I closed my phone and looked out the window, and I said, out loud, to no one, "Thank you." And somewhere in the quiet of that apartment, in the specific way a place feels when no one answers you, and yet the silence doesn't feel empty, I thought I could almost hear her say, "You don't need to thank me, sweetheart. This was always yours. I just held on to it until you were ready." I was ready.